The clacking of her gilded hooves on the stone steps was the only sound as she descended, their pace quickening as she reached the bottom. Her horns sprang to light as she grunted, the heavy door swinging slowly aside. Her eyes narrowed as the door banged against either wall, both from the radiant light and from the voice that greeted her. "Hello, Luna." "That's not my name." Night Moon walked into the room, her mane thrashing behind her. "You are still my sister, no matter what you call yourself." The white alicorn sat on the floor with legs folded, seemingly unperturbed by the conditions of her cell. No windows adorned the walls, nor did the cold stone of the floors and walls offer any warmth. Not even a bedroll lay on the ground, yet she smiled as though she stood in front of her throne. "You may have wrapped yourself in hatred, but my little Luna is in there somewhere." Night Moon felt her mane draw inwards as her anger built. "You condescending! I have every reason to hate you. 1,000 years of watching my beautiful night pass overhead, and I was powerless to control it. 1,000 years of solitary confinement as I watched this world turn from a husk of dust and rock." Night Moon lowered her head, snorting, pawing at the ground. "You deserve to die what you did for me. We were supposed to rule together." Celestia stood, her chin raised as she looked down her snout at her sister. "Yes, we were, and it broke my heart to do that. But you tried to choke the world in eternal night, sister. I love you, Luna, but I would do it again if I had to. Banishing you was the only way—" "You should have just killed me then," Night Moon yelled. "You left me there to rot, tortured me with your betrayal, and you can still tell me to my face that you love me?" Night Moon drew her head back with a gurgling choke, then fluttered it forward as she spit at Celestia. Celestia blinked at the missile hit her chest, but she did not move to wipe it off. "I do love you, sister. I will always love you. One day you'll forget, and you'll forgive me for what I did, and I'll sit here in this cell for 10,000 years, if that's what it takes." "Is that why you haven't fought back? Is that why you haven't tried to escape? Because you want my forgiveness?" Night Moon let out a laugh, telling herself that her tears were from mirth. "I'll never forgive you, so you best just get comfortable." "You'll forgive me, Luna. I'll wait as long as it takes." Celestia sat back down, the pleasant smile never leaving her face. Night Moon felt a vain throb in her forehead as she looked at that smile, so perfectly friendly, yet so condescending. It had always reminded her of a mother looking down at an infant that had just asked a foolish question. For as long as she could remember, Celestia had worn that smile around her. After all, Big Sister always knew best. It didn't help that she was always right. "No, I won't!" Luna screamed, tears welling up in her eyes. "I hate you, Celestia! You refuse to share power because you think I'm stupid, and I'm just some stupid filly. Well, who's stupid now, huh? I beat your elements of harmony, and even have one of them as my personal pet." Luna paused to admire the look of shock that was supposed to be on Celestia's face, grimacing when it didn't appear. "Did you hear me? Your element of loyalty is loyal to me now. I don't even care that you betrayed me, because I have some pony better than you now. And the best part is that your pet project is what made her that way." Luna stood over her sister with a leer, holding back giggles and sobs simultaneously. "I don't need to forgive you, because I don't need you anymore. So give me one good reason why I should." "Because I love you, sister." Luna screamed something, and something red spattered across her face. Her hoof throbbed where it had hit her sister. And a cough from below her turned her gaze downwards. Celestia's smile was finally gone. Instead, her eyes were wide and unfocused as blood trickled down from the corner of her mouth. Adrenaline surged through Luna as her mane flared out, her rage wrapping around her like a warm blanket. With no small amount of will, she lowered her hoof back to the ground. She could feel her heartbeat in every fiber of her muscles, strength coursing through her with every breath, but she held it back. Her anger fed upon itself, growing greater and stronger with every passing moment that Luna didn't focus on keeping it down. The result of 1,000 years of cultivated hatred. More than anything in the world, she wanted to hit her sister again and again and again until there was nothing left to be angry at. I didn't mean... Luna shook her head, struggling to think straight. Look what you made me do. This is all your fault, not mine. I'm not your baby foal to be coddled and forgiven. You've got nobody but yourself to blame for how you treated me. Celestia looked up, drawing a hoof across her mouth. Her eyes locked calmly with Luna's as she composed herself again, her smile returning. Her lips split as she formed the words, every syllable shattering Luna's resolve 10 times over. I'm sorry for what I had to do, and I always will be. But being sorry means nothing without forgiveness. The white alicorn's smile looked like it never had left, her face as white and pristine as always, despite being trapped in a cell. No matter what happens, Luna, I want you to know that I'm sorry for what I did, and that I forgive you for all that you've done. Luna's skin felt like it was on fire as she raised her hoof again. This time, however, she didn't try to hold herself back. The minutes crept on as Night Moon stood at the top of the stairs, the cold air welling up into her face. In a lot of ways, everything had changed again after that day. In too many ways, everything had stayed the same. Night Moon took a deep breath and focused herself on the present, fighting down her déjà vu. The long stairwell stretched down below her. The bottom was pitch black, the infuriating light that had shone out from the cracks of the heavy door, nothing but a memory. A light that Nightmare Moon had finally snuffed out. The clacking of her gilded hooves on the stone steps was the only sound as she descended, their pace quickening as she reached the bottom. Her horn sprang to light as she grunted, the heavy doors swinging slowly aside. Her eyes widened as the doors banged against either wall, both from the utter darkness and from the voice that greeted her. Luna, please. In the light of her mane, Nightmare Moon looked down at the shivering Pegasus. She had been unconscious when Nightmare Moon had brought her here from the roof, but even the alicorn wasn't sure how much time had passed since then, nor how long the Pegasus had been awake. Regardless of the time spent, the captain was not faring well. She lay on her side, hooves drawn up to her chest as she shivered, looking up with pleading eyes at her ruler. The image of a beaten dog crossed Nightmare Moon's mind, but she paid it no heed. Her captain was not a beast, but a living, breathing pony. A pony who had betrayed her. That's not my name. Nightmare Moon growled, her mane thrashing in agitation. Shaking her head as the memories began welling up again, she spoke again as if to spite them. I've figured it all out, Captain. You never raised the town all those months ago, did you? Or, at the very least, you willingly let the town's pony escape. You defied your very first order from me, and you've been hiding it all this time. The captain lay on the ground, though her shivering had calmed down some. I did. Nightmare Moon's mane shrunk lower, though it still flickered like a darkened torch. Then you reported back and refused to aid in quelling the Manhattan riots, saying you'd have enough of burning buildings. I'll admit, it wasn't kindness that kept me from pushing the issue, but rather prudence. I wanted you to break, not make you defect within mere days of joining me. Nightmare Moon turned to the side and began pacing back and forth in front of the Pegasus. But still, that was 2 for 2. I cannot fathom how I ever trusted you from there on out. The captain remained silent, breathing deliberately and slowly to stop her shaking. Nightmare Moon continued as the silence dragged on. I suppose I'll never know how many of my orders you sabotaged, But that doesn't matter. Honestly, I don't blame you for those early days. You were just like every other foal in this world, blind to my intention and wisdom. And I let myself be blinded by your intentions. Listen to yourself, Luna. You're sounding like the old... That's not my name! Nightmare Moon yelled, thrusting her snout into the captain's face. The Pegasus whimpered and drew back, and a pang of guilt resounded in Nightmare Moon's conscience. Nightmare Moon drew back, her mane calming as she turned somberly away. Luna is dead. She died with Celestia. And you swore to never let that happen again, didn't you? Turning sharply, Nightmare Moon's eyes narrowed. You tricked me into that. I was confused, and you saw an opportunity. You pretended to care, made me promise to control my anger. But why should I? Why should I limit my power just because some backstabbing traitor says to? With a grunt, the captain rolled onto her knees, pushing herself off the ground one leg at a time. Finally, with shaky legs, but her chest pushed forward, the captain spoke. I would never betray you. Nightmare Moon's vision narrowed as she approached the Pegasus, leering over her as she came close. I saw you, she hissed. I used Trixie's spell to find you, to make sure you were all right. I thought she had killed you, and like an idiot, I was worried. And then I find you out that you're helping New Ponyville, doing your best to keep Trixie and I from killing them. I thought you had left your old loyalties in the dirt. But now it's clear. Now I know that I can't trust any pony, not even the paragon of loyalty herself. At the last phrase, the captain's shoulders slouched. I'm not the paragon of loyalty, she muttered. The Alicorn snorted, the hot air blowing back the captain's mane. Finally, some honesty. Now, before I simply write you off as another failed experiment in friendship, one detail keeps nagging at me. If you want to protect New Ponyville, why did you come back here? The captain's ears perked up, and she raised her head to meet Nightmare Moon's gaze. I came to warn you. Trixie is lying, like she always has been. You know she's a venomous bitch. And this whole rebel base thing is just a power ploy. It's not too late. You can still stop her. Nightmare Moon looked down, bile rising in her throat. So, that's it? She asked, surprised to hear the disbelief in her own voice. She had expected... Well, she didn't really know. An apology, maybe? Begging? You flew to your own death to try and manipulate me further into actively helping the ponies you claimed to have killed months ago. The pleading look on the captain's face vanished, and she shook her head. No, wait, I mean, kinda? Look, but just let me explain. Luna screamed. Something red splattered across her face. Her hoof throbbed where it hit her sister, and a cough from below turned her gaze downward. Celestia's smile was finally gone. Instead, her eyes were wide and unfocused, as blood trickled down from the corner of her mouth. With a gasp, Nightmare Moon caught her hoof in the air. The captain had froze beneath her, too terrified to even shiver. Slowly, Nightmare Moon lowered her hoof to the ground, eyes wide in surprise at herself. It had seemed so real, yet the captain lay untouched beneath her. Nightmare Moon stood silent for a moment, trying to hide her own shivers. With a voice like a dying breath, she choked out, "Go on." It was a moment before the captain recovered enough to speak. I burned down my hometown, just like you ordered. You never told me to kill every pony, but you're right. I twisted your orders. This is different now. For the past few weeks, I've been bouncing around from one prison cell to another, first at New Ponyville, and then in Trixie's camp. I've been trying to get back to you to report this whole time, but... look, let me start from the beginning. The captain took a deep breath, recalling back to her first report. One of my scouts saw a purple unicorn and a rainbow Pegasus in the ruins of Ponyville when this whole thing started. Night Moon scoffed. Trixie made the report herself, now that you remind me of it. Of course, I didn't believe her, because I trusted you. The captain shook her head. No, you aren't listening. A rainbow Pegasus and a purple unicorn. Luna, they made the report to me, so I wasn't the Pegasus. Now think back. What exactly did you hear during your spell? Night Moon thought back, her gut telling her that something was off. A white unicorn told you to save the town. In order to do that, you had to stop Twilight. Night Moon's eyes widened as her throat seized. The captain remained silent as understanding hit Night Moon. No, but it can't be her. Just like it can't have been me. She's gone. There must be some mistake. That's what I'm trying. But I heard with my own ears. Twilight is alive. But I saw her. There's two of them. Night Moon's blinked at the captain's yelling, before collecting herself. Could it really be true? It made no logical sense, that was certain. Wait, was it certain? Wouldn't it explain so much if... No, not her. She can't be back. Night Moon spun from the Pegasus, already headed towards the stairs. Behind her, the captain called out, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Twilight, the purple unicorn. Barely more than a filly, but determined enough to push through everything I threw at her. The first pony to oppose me on my return, and the first one I killed. She ignored the captain's voice as she galloped up the stairs, 100 questions running through her head. She needed time to think and to answer them, and she had no time for the Pegasus's complaints. Fortunately for the captain, she also had no time for such trifles as closing cell doors. As a matter of fact, Rainbow Dash had seen a light. Twilight knew this because, after a few moments of maneuvering around trees, Twilight was also able to make out a distant glimmer. It had been a miracle that either one of them had seen it at all around the skeletal limbs, and Twilight managed a chuckle when she realized that this time they almost had been good enough. Even though they hadn't escaped the forest before daybreak, some distant light had been sent to guide them out. Even after the trees had thinned out enough that walking was no longer hazardous, the light had hardly grown at all. For all Twilight could tell, the two mares could have now been walking in the longest clearing of the forest, or right in the middle of Ponyville. Neither mare spoke, paranoid that the slightest disturbance would upset this turn in their favor, and instead walked deliberately, as if in a trance. Twilight lifted her hoof out of the soft muck that was once grass, but when she placed it down again, she felt the texture of hard dirt. In the glowing light, it was just barely possible to squint out the road beneath her, and she took her first deep breath, as she dared to since the daybreak. Something bumped into Twilight with a grunt, and the unicorn spun around with wide eyes. Rainbow Dash's eyes were half closed and her mouth slightly agape, but she managed to cock her head in confusion. Rainbow, we've reached a road. The Pegasus shook her head, taking herself off autopilot. What? Where? I still can't see a thing. Twilight opened her mouth, but found herself without an answer. It was hard to see, to be sure, but she could make out Rainbow Dash clearly enough. Or at least the shape of her anyway. You can't see me at all. Your eyes are always sharp as a hawk's. Twilight could see Dash's eyes, her ears flatten, as she grumbled her way past the unicorn, stumbling slightly. Yeah, well, you have those freaky eyes. You can probably see in the dark better than me. Actually, that makes a lot of sense. With my pupils dilated, maybe that's exactly what's happening. Twilight shrugged, turning back to the light. The two mares continued walking, Twilight's vision improving all the while. So, what do you think it is? Twilight almost jumped at the sudden conversation, realizing she had been letting herself fall back into a trance. I don't know, to be honest. What kind of light travels so far during the day? Twilight realized she had spoken like the days of her own world were a thing long gone, rather than just memories over a week old. Celestia, has it only been so long? Did I lose count along the way? To To be fair, she never really was keeping count. Days were always easy to keep track of, right? With no real light and no sleep schedule at all, how was she supposed to keep tabs on what time it was? Never mind what day. Speaking of sleep, how long ago was the last time she'd slept? Twilight, I think I can see you now. Twilight turned to face the squinting Rainbow Dash, whose eyes loosely followed her movement. Yeah, I can totally make you out. Your eyes must be a lot better than mine, though. Twilight didn't know what to say. Her eyes were a lot better, and she could make out the ground a few feet in either direction now. The light was casting silhouettes on something towards her, and Twilight squinted as they approached. Realization hit her as an archway passed overhead. Rainbow, we're here! This is New Ponyville! Dash cursed softly as she stubbed a hoof. The small bridge over Ponyville's stream rising before them. So wait, that means the light is coming from somewhere in here? Yes, and I think I know where. It makes sense, really. Twilight thought as the two mares moved briskly over the more even ground. I mean, if there was any one anomaly in this world, one exception to a day that actively suppresses any light, it would naturally have to be her. Rainbow Dash groaned as she made out what had already become clear to Twilight's eyes. Sugar Cube Corner stood before them, light pouring out from every window. Maybe it wasn't a miracle that we saw this after all. Twilight worried as uneasiness settled over the frozen mares. Maybe she's been waiting for us all along. I can't tell him, Rarity. Not now. Between the crack of stone and the pounding of mallets, Applejack didn't even have to keep her voice down as she made her way out of the guardhouse. Even the sight of the rising barricade of the bridge wasn't enough to console her. If I knew there was no resistance, or if they knew, Celestia, even I'd give up at that point. But you saw how Big Mac. Rarity, we finally did it. There's hope in these ponies, even if it is grim hope. Something to actively fight for. A home to defend. If it's all coming together now, even if Twilight really is the best chance we got, we just take the resistance away from them. Not while they're still willing to die for it. Applejack looked to her side, but Rarity just stared at the ground as she walked. If she had even heard what Applejack had said, she didn't know. I mean, I know I'm supposed to be the element of honesty and all. There's a degree of practicality here that we gotta think about. If I tell him the truth now, our best chances of survival would be Trixie interrupting our lynching. Still, Rarity said nothing, and Applejack began to calm down a tad. There simply ain't enough logic to it at all. I'll tell him the truth, I know I will, but I gotta wait for the right time. Once this is all over, I'll tell him all. As if to punctuate her decision, a thunderous boom rumbled through the air. The sounds of construction halted instantly as dust trickled down from the walls and ceiling. Just as Applejack's mind began to clear, an identical boom rumbled through the stone beneath her again. A gigantic red pony exploded into movement across the bridge, shouting orders. Instantly, ponies were pounding and hammering at twice their previous speed. The two mares stood dumbfounded as Big Mac rushed out of the guardhouse, pushing both of them across the rubble-strewn bridge. Another boom echoed throughout the cavern. A series of distant cracks, revealing the stalactites, had been shaken loose somewhere in the cavern. With a shake of her head, Applejack recovered enough to realize what was happening. They're here, Rarity spoke. In the bustle of desperate preparation, it might have been a whisper. We're not ready, but they're here.